Okay. Did you get that recording in progress?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. I've got this list of topics, but the glaring thing that's just, almost kept me awake last night is that we have a president of the United States that is lying directly to people's faces, okay, and laughing about it. I mean, he's actually mocking the audience for the fact that he's lying to your face, and he's effectively saying there's not a damn thing you can do about it. I'm going to lie to you, and I'm going to laugh about it. And there isn't, there's this meeting happening now, this security meeting. There's not a single head of state of any NATO nation that has said a word about this big lie, this psychological operation that's underway right now to lie to the US and Europe and the rest of the world. Um, it's just, I've never seen anything like it. Um, I mean, I, Having been through the Russia hoax, I'm used to my government lying to me, and with impunity. But it's so obvious to me that there's no other explanation other than the U.S. blew up this pipeline, and for the White House to issue a statement that they don't know anything about it is just, it's so obviously false. So
Well,
what do you make of all this?
well, I think the United States government has been lying ever since I was old enough to understand what they've been saying. But this thing, I don't think anybody is fooled about the pipeline. They can deny it all they want in your face. Everybody knows what the truth is. I think Hirsch's article is right on. There's nothing that can be questioned about that. The Munich Security Conference, it's hosted by Germany, so they sort of set up the agenda. And it was kind of interesting because you can really see how journalists filter according to their prejudices, their class background, their cultural identity, whatever, what country they come from, by the way that they report on this. Now, if you look at NATO and the United States journalists, they're all reporting about everything's about Ukraine. But I took a trip through the different press in the South yesterday, whether it be Latin America or Africa or Asia or the Middle East, and they're all talking about the necessity for a new world economic order. Nothing about Ukraine. So there are about 100 countries at this Munich Security Conference, and the global West is trying to make this all about Ukraine when all the others who are there are not making it about Ukraine. And they're saying exactly what the Russians and the Chinese and the Indians are saying. We need a new world economic order. So in reality, even though thanks to our press and thanks to the internet and all that, the NATO US group seems strong, in reality, they are not. And that is what they're hiding from our publics, from American publics, from European publics, is that on a world level, we are extremely isolated on all of this. And, you must have listened to Kamala Harris's speech at the Munich conference. Any Arab, Somali, Yemeni, Pakistani, Afghan, who listened to that speech must have been rolling their eyes when she's accusing Russia of war crimes which are unacceptable. And when you think of what the United States has done the past 20 years in those countries.
Absolutely.
So I think we tend to on a global scale give too much importance to the influence of these people. Now, on the scale that you're mentioning, the United States and Europe, yes, the Europeans and Americans are extremely confused because of the extreme censorship and the one-sided, on-side reporting by the mainstream media.
Yeah, it's a curious thing, but I for a long time I wrestled with the idea of whether people were fooled In other words, people that believe the narrative, let's say, whatever the current narrative is, the psychological operation that's underway, whether people actually believe it, especially journalists, are they buying this? Do they actually think this is accurate, or are they just sort of lying to themselves in order to maintain the narrative? And recently, it's become clear to me that it's willful. I mean, it's
Oh,
intentional.
yes, I think that journalists do, most of the journalists lying to us do know the truth. I mean, I've confronted people like Stephen Erlanger on air, and they know they're lying. And I mean, yeah, go back to the coup in Indonesia, where Erlanger first got his wings. When he whitewashed and popularized the coup, which left 1 million people dead, according to the Indonesian government itself. Um, yeah, these people, they know what they're doing, and they know where their bread is buttered, and they should be punished for this. I gave a speech at the Ramsey Clark War Crimes Tribunal after the 1991 first Gulf War, where the title was "Information is a Weapon. Journalists are its mercenaries," and that is the case. These people are mercenaries for the system, just like people in Congress who are getting wealthy from donors by doing their bidding. They
Yeah.
know what they're
Well,
doing. Most of them, yes.
now that you mentioned Congress, okay, why is there not a peep out of Congress? Okay, it's like I don't need Cy Hirsch to tell me that, what happened. It's plainly obvious what happened. I mean, no other country on the face of the earth had the means, the intent, and the premeditation to carry out
Yeah.
this operation. Uh, I mean, they readily admitted that they were going to do this, and then they went and did it. So
It's
it's I don't need Cy Hirsch to say like I've got a source. I mean, it's there's no other explanation for what happened.
Well, I think it's obvious to all of us, but it's not useless what he did, because it does put these people in an embarrassing situation where they have to deny the obvious.
Oh, I
And
welcome what
and
he
and the
did. But I mean, it's not to for people to dispute the veracity of it. It's just, I mean, that's just I guess you call it a red herring, right? I mean, it just
yeah,
doesn't matter. Um, the
yeah,
plain truth
it's
is there. It's obvious. You don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows.
yeah. Yeah, but the thing is that it will put them in a difficult situation. Now, you asked me earlier in a mail that you sent me about Schultz. Schultz is playing the game that Helmut Kohl played in 1991. Everybody knew, including the cleaning ladies, that the war in Iraq, the drones and the air missions and all of that, was being controlled out of Ram Mine air base
Rammstein, yeah.
in Kaiserslautern,
Right,
Germany.
right.
And but the Germans, they refused to take part in that war, saying they didn't support it or anything like that. And Kohl was asked uh, if that was happening at Ram Mine, and Kohl said, "I have been given no information about that." In other words, he didn't lie; he just
Right.
didn't ask the question. You see, and that's a little bit what they're doing today. Although that the left, and it's interesting to see that it's the left and the right and not the center that are asking these questions. And in the Bundestag, they are asking these questions. So we'll see if they're forced to respond or not. I agree that this is obvious, but I do think that Cy Hirsch's article puts them in a tricky position where they have to blatantly lie. And the more that they lie, the more people will see that they have no credit. And that's what we need to do. Like you and I having this discussion, maybe we'll reach people that others who are saying the same thing haven't been able to reach, because perhaps we're saying it differently, so that we can reach these people, because obviously there's a problem. I am convinced that we are right. I am convinced that this war is wrong. I am convinced that this is premeditated, that we are being lied to. And I think most people are honest and good, and when they know the truth, will react accordingly. And if they're not, for some reason, the truth isn't getting through to them, and that's what we have to work at. And I think in that case, Cy Hirsch's article on the bombing of Nord Stream 1 and 2 is useful.
Oh, I agree that it's useful, and I mean any way that the truth starts to reach people is valuable. Speaking of Kamala Harris and her war crimes accusations, in my opinion, what about the murder effectively of 1 million people in Iraq? That's sorry, in Ukraine. That's going to result from this war. I mean, probably about 500,000 people are dead already, or horribly injured. And if it goes on for another year, there's another 500,000. That's 1 million people, either dead or seriously injured, probably for the rest of their lives. Um, doesn't that constitute a war crime? 1 million dead?
The war crimes in Ukraine, I'm afraid if there is an honest international investigation, will be laid principally on the side of the Ukrainians and not the side of the Russians, even though I don't deny there have been war crimes. The Ukrainians have not hesitated to post online images of their war crimes, what they are doing, shooting prisoners, torturing people, stripping, absolutely horrible stuff.
Right.
I'd like to remind listeners that in 2009, the very well-known British medical journal, The Lancet, and Johns Hopkins University did a study on the deaths in Iraq as a cause of the American invasion of Iraq. And in 2009, 1 million Iraqis had died
Right.
as a result of the American invasion of Iraq. We
Yeah.
mustn't forget these things. And the other thing is, I have heard and I have read that in the first 24 hours of the attack on Iraq, 95% of Iraq's infrastructure was destroyed.
Right.
And these are the people who dare to criticize Russia for what's going on in Ukraine. I mean, it's just the pot calling the kettle black.
Yeah, yeah. All war crimes discussions are just complete hypocrisy. That's there's no rationality to who assigns war crimes. I mean, it's just whoever has the microphone, really. But let's move on to what is Congress going to do, if anything, about this president. And let's talk about also the implications for the 2024 election. Whether Biden will run. So what are your thoughts on first, what should the Congress do? What can the Congress do? And then what about whether Bush is running or not?
Well, I think what the Congress should do is absolutely ask for explanations, ask embarrassing questions, subpoena officials to come in and under oath be questioned really vibrantly on what exactly happened. But they won't do that. And they won't do that because perhaps you and I disagree a little bit here, because both sides of the aisle know where their bread is buttered. And they're not going to rock the system. I believe that almost all of them are in one way or another corrupt, not illegally corrupt, because we discussed it. We've discussed this. In fact, much of the corruption is perfectly legal, like revolving doors, etc. So I don't think they're going to do anything unless like the demonstration this Sunday is big enough to force them to do something. They're not going to do anything.
I don't
We
think
saw
they're
this
going to
during the
respond to
Vietnam War.
demonstrations. I don't think that's going to make any difference. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think there's a uniparty. Mitch McConnell is apparently more concerned about, he says the war in Iraq is the most important, defeating Russia is the most important thing that's in front of us. And I mean, he's the minority leader in the Senate.
Do they even realize what it means to say defeat Russia? Do they have any idea what that means? Russia cannot lose this war. It's existential. If you want to save the world and avoid nuclear war, you have to reach a deal with Russia. Russia is not going to roll over and play dead.
How is it that people have forgotten that Russia's a nuclear power?
It's amazing. It's just amazing. The problem is, I'll tell you the truth. The problem is, the Americans have not known a war since 1865, and so for them, it's TV, it's video games, it's far away, and they have no idea how close it really is. And and I hope they don't have to learn how close it is. But somebody should give them a wake-up call for this. It's insane that these people in Washington are so irresponsible as to push the world to the brink of nuclear war. Um, Another interesting thing about the Security Council, the Munich Security Conference, is that what China said. China really called out the United States on their Cold War mentality, and being hysterical. So China is also on the other side of the whole dilemma that we're facing. The people in Washington, they've completely lost their minds.
Yeah. Well, and so I saw Ursula von der Leyen questioned by a Deutsche Welle reporter about China offering to broker a peace deal. And her response was that, well, China's biased. I mean, they're not a disinterested party here. They've made their choice. In other words, effectively saying, well, they're not one of us.
Well, van der Leyen has to be careful because she's really going over the bounds of her mandate. But on the other hand, Germany cannot anger China. Germany is the world's #1 export country, and its principal client, or one of its biggest clients, is China. Without China, Germany just crumbles because it's an export-oriented economy. And so van der Leyen needs to walk a pretty easy path there. If she angers the Chinese enough. And the other thing is, how can she say China's biased? I mean, the EU is not biased. They've been covering up what's been going on since 2014 all the time.
They're the
Yeah,
epitome
go
of
ahead.
bias and collective
It's
bias.
amazing. It's amazing. Like nothing happened between 2014 and 2022 when Merkel admitted in December they only signed the agreement, the Minsk agreement, so that they could buy time to arm and train Ukraine to fight against the Russians. Holland confirmed that that's what they did. Poroshenko said so. Even Zelensky said he had never had any intention of implementing the Minsk II Accords. So, the dupe here is Russia. These people are just cynical and dishonest. It's terrible what they did, and taking the world to the brink of a major international war.
Yeah. By the way, is there any figure in Europe more useless than Charles Michel? I mean, does he ever utter what constructive thing has Charles Michel ever donated to the rest of the world? Name one.
Right. I think we have to, let's see, he's the president of the European Council of Ministers, right? And van der Leyen is the president of the European Commission, so that people know. Basic question I could ask you is, who's Charles Michel? Oh, yeah, he's the guy when they went to Ankara to see Erdogan, who got to sit down while von der Leyen didn't have a seat. I don't know if you remember that, but I mean, Charles Michel is an insignificant figure, except when it came to embarrassing von der Leyen in
Well, I
Ankara.
mean, he appears in every buffet line from Davos to any other meeting that's happening anywhere. But what is his actual contribution? I've yet to see anything from that guy.
Well,
But anyway,
he just chairs the meetings of the heads of state and the ministers. I mean, I can't say that he's served any kind of role whatsoever.
I've never even heard him utter anything significant, really. I mean, he does photo ops with Zelensky and so forth, but anyway, he's very tall, and I think the secret of Charles Michel is that tall people make it in life, even if they're completely useless sometimes. Um,
Be careful. Let me give you a list of very short people. And when I say short, I mean very short. Macron,
yeah,
Berlusconi, Putin,
yeah.
Hollande.
Underlying.
There's certainly a few others. But yeah, the women, I'll give them a break. But the men are really short, and the shorter they are, the more martial they try to be.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I guess we should probably move towards a wrap here. But so, whether Joe Biden, do you expect him to run in 2024? And what are the implications if he runs and doesn't run?
I don't expect him to make it to 2024. He seems really feeble at the moment, and not totally coherent. And but I, my problem is, who are the Democrats going to run next year? I just don't see anybody
Yeah, they
that can
have no
step
one.
forward. And no, I don't see anybody. I mean, Harris was a terrible choice for vice president, even worse than Clinton for president in 16. I just don't see who they can run next
I
year.
actually
It's going
think
to be interesting.
I actually think Clinton
You're
could
go,
have been an effective president. I mean, overlooking all of her evil misdeeds, she's actually a competent person. I mean, Harris can't even put a sentence together. So, I mean, she's the epitome of a lightweight. But yeah, I don't. They obviously have nobody else. They're sort of stuck with him. Um, the Republicans have ample reason to impeach Biden on any number of issues, especially if they start to uncover some criminality in the dealings of his son Hunter, and influence peddling and so forth, and getting involved in the corruption in Ukraine. I think you've seen this funding of the Penn Biden Center, tens of millions of dollars from uh, China, and effectively the Chinese government that funded, among other things, a fat salary for Anthony Blinken, before he came into the White House with Biden and was appointed Secretary of State. Um, it's
but the thing about corruption is that most of it is legal. Look at the
Oh, I
head of the
agree with you.
Fed.
No,
The head of the
I see
Fed comes
that
out of the
too.
bank. You know, the head of the Fed comes out of the banks, runs the Fed, and goes back to the banks after serving the soup. Clinton worked for Wall Street. That's clear. I can't forgive her for Libya, Syria, Ukraine, her support for Iraq, the Iraq invasion, etc. She's in Yemen. She's the one who's responsible for what's going on in Yemen. She's a terrible person. I hope that she has no future in American politics. But I just don't see. What could be interesting next year is because there so many people have been so discredited that if the infighting becomes important enough, what could happen is what I would wish for the United States is that we quit this bi-party polarization and
Uniparty.
enter
Oh, I
a
see what you're
system, yeah, where we have a real multi-party system where different points of view are expressed and represented, not just the point of view of the top 10% who are raking in the money in America, and among them members of Congress.
Well, the problem is, even when there is criminality, the this is really egregious to me, that the court system in Washington, D.C., the fact that John Durham couldn't even get a conviction of people like Sussman, who obviously broke the law. That the combination of partisan judges and partisan juries in the District of Columbia, where these cases are tried. I mean, that's really a danger to our whole republic, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I would suggest it's such a vast subject, the American judicial system, that it would be a whole discussion just on its own. So we can't go into it now. Needless to say, I think the American judicial system has to be completely overhauled and a whole different system put in place. It's just dysfunctional and unjust, and biased in all sorts of ways, depending where you are. So
And
that
have
would
to
be a
mention
subject for
also,
another time.
well, I have to mention also the political prisoners. These people have been held for 2 years now in jail without due process for because they demonstrated and Nancy Pelosi flung open the doors of the Capitol, invited these people, lured them in. You know, in similar to the way that where Russia was lured into Ukraine, you know, these poor slobs were lured into the Capitol, and now that you know, a number of them in jail for 2 years with no.
Yeah, I think on the January 6th element, there are two investigations to be had. Those who uh, trespassed and forced the gates, and what their intentions were and what they did. But the other one is, how was that even possible that that happened? You know, who is responsible for not having planned some sort of defense of the Capitol that day? So you know, there are two investigations to be had, and so far only one has been had.
Yeah, well, I mean, Trump offered the National Guard and Pelosi refused. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, this is Pelosi's Reichstag fire. That's how I see it. I
Uh,
think she
well,
orchestrated the whole thing. She had the cameras rolling, you know, as the events were unfolding so that she could, you know, portray herself as, you know, whatever she thinks she is. And anyway, she's
yeah,
still on stage now at the Munich Security Conference.
is she there?
Well,
Wow.
apparently, uh, there was Gilbert Doctorow wrote about or having a kissy kissy with Annalena Baerbock. So there's a pair that'll beat a full house. Um,
That's another discussion to be had, because we have a real um, fight between Baerbock and Schultz at the moment
right.
in Germany, because Baerbock, she thought she should be chancellor. And this is a real power struggle. And it's going to be interesting to see how far it goes and whether it weakens the coalition enough that it has to be overhauled, because she is really, I mean, her statement basically said that Germany was at war with Russia, you know, and every time she speaks, I'm just trying to figure out who she's going to declare on war on next. And Schultz has to really backtrack everything she says. It's absolutely horrible. This woman is
Right.
terrible.
You know, Schultz' tenure, I mean, he just reels from one humiliation to the next. I mean, if it's not her
It's
humiliating him, it's Biden humiliating him.
it's a very strange thing about German politics and German government. The amount of liberty that cabinet members have to say things which embarrass other cabinet members, and it's very difficult to figure out which foot you're standing on. And this coalition is a very strange coalition, indeed. It's a very strange coalition.
Well, I had asked you before the call about this election in Berlin, and it's a little confusing to me because obviously in the U.S. we have our elections, we bring a you know a whole group into Congress at one time. It appears to me that in Germany they have these regional elections. Where,
State elections, yeah.
yeah,
Each state has its own elections and its own parliament. Berlin is a state. What is it? 15 states in Germany, something like that, I think.
okay.
And they're separate, and the states have a lot of power in Germany, a lot of power.
So okay, so this wasn't an
For
election for the national parliament.
No, 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 no. But it's
Okay,
indicative of how the different parties are faring. And the next nationwide elections for the Bundestag are in 2025. But states have a lot of power in Germany and can actually, for example, take the COVID thing. States could refuse the chancellor's and the minister of health's mandates and decide what they were going to do themselves. For example, there are no smoking laws inside in Germany. Well, some states overrule that, for example. So states have a lot of power in Germany, and also the elections in Germany are very strange. I kind of like it. It's a one vote system where you vote directly for people on the one hand, and you vote for parties on the other. So what happens is a certain number of the elected, a certain number of the candidates get elected directly, and then they have this very complicated mathematical process to determine how many people from each party get a seat according to the proportion of votes that they got. So you never have the same number of parliamentarians in the Bundestag.
Right.
It changes with every election. It's a very complicated system, but it does create the possibility that the different points of view of society are represented in parliament. And also it makes coalitions possible, which means that nobody is hammering through their own agenda. They have to sort of compromise. And that's what democracy is. Democracy is a compromise. And unfortunately, in countries like France, with this two-way election system, like in 2017, Macron got 25% of the vote and almost 80% of the parliamentarians. There's no democracy there. So
Okay.
I kind of like the German system, or the Italian system for that matter.
Okay. But back to the US, just to wrap this up. You don't think that Biden will run in 2020. You don't think he can.
I don't think he can, no, and I don't think people will want him to, because if you watch him since he took office, you can see that at least I have the impression that his physical and mental state is degrading, and I just don't see him. No, I don't see him running again next year,
Okay.
and I have
Okay.
no idea what the Democrats are going to do.
Well, and that's the problem, though, is that they have no one else. So I
I
wouldn't be
don't see
surprised if he
anybody.
runs. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they. I mean, it's a dilemma for them right now. The Republicans, on the other hand, seem almost completely disorganized. Uh, you know, they don't work together. They just sort of run off in a million different directions, and I mean, they've got a real opportunity with the majority in the House, and I keep waiting for something worthwhile to come of it, and I've yet to see anything really. I mean,
Well,
look, it's a target-rich environment, so it's a tough call where you should, put your resources. Um, but
Well, the best thing that can happen, in my opinion, is both parties explode and we get a different posture next year, where we'll have a larger choice.
well, that'd be worthwhile, but it's I mean, it's tough to go against a uniparty. The
Yeah.
resources are just overwhelming, and the dominance is just uh, supreme. But it's also its own worst enemy. I mean, it's a danger to itself and the rest of us. So um, anyway, uh, any other closing thoughts on discussion today?
I think we've gone a long way. I had prepared something on American military budget, but I can hold on to that for the next session.
Okay. Well, yeah, it looks like we're running short of time for the slot here. So thanks a lot, and
Yep.
it's been interesting. It's the news that's coming out is just more interesting every day, um, but also just bizarre.
Yeah, we'll have more to say next week.
Okay, thanks a lot, George. Great job.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye. Okay, so I just ended the recording.